Welcome back, everyone. I am Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and this is probably the last Marvel Champions video. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's going to be the second last Marvel Champions video of 2021 because we just got a new product announcement, and that is the Sinister Motives big box expansion. So this is going to be the next big box expansion after we just got the big Mad Titan Shadow release. This is all Spider-Man themed, which was really exciting for you Spider-Man fans out there. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I already have my tickets to No Way Home coming out in a couple weeks. Super pumped about that. So this one is just one that is right away on my radar. And of course we got the announcement, which I think it was hinted at before, that the 4 hero packs that are going to follow this expansion are all going to be the Web Warriors or tied into the Web Warriors in some way, which means we're going to get a whole chain in a row of Spider-Man themed hero packs to go after this, which is super, super exciting. They just know how to get my money. I think they know how to get all of our money. Basically, they just give us exactly what we want whenever we think, oh, this is where I'm going to stop buying Marvel Champions. I mean, I don't, because I'm going to be buying it to do content, but whenever any of us start thinking like, oh, you know what, I think I'll just pause here. I'll take a break on this hero. Something draws us back in. That's what I hear the most feedback from people, is that every time they think they're not going to buy a pack or something, they realize they need to buy it. Anyway, so we're getting 2 new heroes in this pack. It is the Ghost Spider, which is like Spider-Gwen, and then we're also getting Miles Morales, 2 very exciting heroes, and they look really, really fun. And then we're getting, of course, all the new villains, and I think there's only one scenario that has not been revealed so far, but we are getting Sandman, we're getting Venom, which is obviously going to be one that people are super excited about, we're getting Mysterio, and we're getting a Sinister Six scenario with all 6 villains as well. The 5th scenario, which I imagine there is, has not been revealed. That probably is going to involve the person behind the Sinister Six in this storyline, but we do have the other ones revealed, and they all seem very, very cool. So there are a ton of cards to go through in here. I'm not going to spend tons of time on each one. I'm going to cover them all in some form or fashion, but we do have a lot to get through. I'm going to start by covering the villains, and then after that we'll jump into the heroes and we'll talk about each of the new cards that was revealed. Lots of exciting stuff. So let's jump right into Sandman. So Sandman is the first scenario that you'll encounter in this box, and his villain card has 2 attack, 1 scheme, and the ability is called Sandblast. Sandblast is a force interrupt. When Sandman attacks you, that attack deals indirect damage. If your identity takes any amount of damage from that attack, resolve the Surging Sands ability on city streets. So the first thing to note here is obviously the fact that it's going to be indirect damage, which is a lot harder to deal with. But on top of that, we have this Surging Sands ability. So to really understand that, we have to jump to city streets so you can understand what exactly is being triggered. And city streets is an environment card, and it has the Surging Sands special ability, which says, place 1 sand counter here, discard cards from the top of the encounter deck equal to the number of sand counters here after you put that counter on. So you're always going to discard at least 1, but it's going to increasingly get more and more. And of course, the quicker we go through the encounter deck, the quicker we're going to add acceleration tokens, and it's going to make the scenario a lot harder for us. So the hero action on top of this is basically your way to control this, and it says exhaust a character you control, remove sand counters from here equal to that character's attack. So really, you're going to have to enter the scenario either the hero you've chosen to go through this campaign or the way that you built their deck. You're going to have to be thinking of this scenario in a way of, how can I use this character's attack as essentially as a way to remove counters? So because the amount of counters you're removing is equal to the character's attack, you want to try to avoid, if you're playing multiplayer, having the character that has, you say, 1 attack be the one that's removing counters. You want to go to your one that has 3 or more if you've built up their attack in that way. So heroes that have higher base attack, or you've built their deck to increase it, are going to have a higher success rate against this scenario. And you don't have to start necessarily with a high attack. You could start low and build them up over time. But that's something you're going to want to consider when you're building decks for this specific scenario or picking heroes. Either way, it seems like you're going to be constantly managing, because you have to exhaust them when you do that. You're going to be managing when to deal damage to Sandman and when to take city streets into consideration, start managing the counters on there. Seems like it'll be nothing earth-shattering or groundbreaking in terms of the scenario, but there is some cool stuff happening here with it, and you'll have to be sort of juggling what you're managing there. Moving on to another card, which is Sand Form. This is an attachment that you'll attach to Sandman specifically. When you would deal any amount of damage to Sandman, discard Sand Form this card instead and resolve the Surge in Sands ability. And the boost here is to reveal this card. So if you get it as a boost icon, you're putting it on Sandman essentially. So this is just another way that Surge in Sands is going to trigger. So essentially having this on Sandman is just going to increase the amount of times you're at encounters, which is going to increase the amount of cards you're discarding. Again, everything about him seems to be ramping up this city streets, covering them in sand thematically, making things tougher for you in the long term. Next one is Sand Clone. This is a minion. It has 1 scheme and X attack with 3 health, and X is equal to the number of sand counters on city streets. So later in the game, when if you've allowed city streets to get out of control, or perhaps maybe you've abandoned trying to control it because you're so close to beating Sandman, if this comes out, suddenly you could have a Sand Clone that still only has 3 health, but might have 7 attack or 8 attack if things have gotten really, really bad for you. It's hard to know without having played the scenario how common that's going to be and how much that's going to scale up, but it is a pretty neat way to tie that in, saying like at any point this minion can come out and could have a ridiculous attack, which means now you have to deal with it, or you have to find a way to deal with city streets to reduce the attack. So neat way to deal with it. And thematically, the sand clones are coming out of the city streets that are covered in sand. I really like the way they've tied that in. When defeated, resolve the Surge in Sand's ability. So even after you have taken care of this card, you're still gonna have to resolve the Surge in Sand's ability, discard more cards, add another counter. Those are all the cards we got for Sandman. He seems more of like again, it's an introductory scenario. Usually the first scenario isn't anything crazy or groundbreaking. It is sort of a way to introduce us to some concepts and get us ready, the one that's not going to always give us a ton of trouble. It still seems like it could be a difficult one, but there's nothing really, really different going on in terms of mechanics, as we'll see with some of the next scenarios, but it is one that it seems like it'll be fun to play either way. The second scenario is Venom, and Venom has some really cool stuff going on. I really like the thematics of this one, and I like the mechanics and what's all involved. So the villain card has 2 attack and 1 scheme, and toughness, which means it's going to come with a tough status card. I should mention these villains are the stage 1 versions. We haven't seen stage 2 and 3 to see how those evolve. Venom has the Vengeance ability. So this is a forced response. After you attack and damage Venom with a card you control, place 1 face-down boost card on your identity. So as we'll see, basically, again, this is every time you attack and damage Venom with a card you control. So keep that in mind. You're going to be adding these boost cards on top of your identity. And there's going to be many of these cards being added onto your identity. And then when Venom engages, he's going to essentially use all these boost cards against you to do these massive attacks, which is a really cool way to thematically make Venom based on his character in the comics and the shows and stuff. And then we'll see on the main scheme, which is called Leave Us Alone, the force interrupt is when Venom activates against you, move each face down boost card from your identity to Venom. So basically, at the time that Venom is going to act against you, all those cards are moving over to him, and he's going to power up either his scheme or his attack, basically, however he's activating against you. So he's going to have, even though he only has 2 base attack, 1 base scheme, you're going to find that he's having much higher numbers than those based on how many of these cards are there for you. And this is the only scheme level. It does say if the stage is completed, the players lose the game. So this is the one main scheme that's going to be out, and if you defeat Venom, if he gets too much threat on it, you are going to lose. You're never going to have to think that you're going to advance this to the next scheme level, and this forced interrupt isn't going to be a thing. It's going to be a thing for the entire scenario. Then we have, so that's not the only interesting mechanic with Venom. So if you're familiar with the comics, the original introduction to Venom, and even Spider-Man 3 where Venom was introduced, there is this bell tower that is really ingrained in the lore of Venom, and also the fact that Venom and the symbiote have this, they're susceptible to sound. So we have the bell tower, which is basically your way of controlling Venom and keeping things manageable considering how strong his attacks and his thwarts are going to be. So the bell tower is an environment that has 2 sides on it. The first side is considered the quiet side, so those bells aren't ringing. And it says if there are at least 3 chime counters per player on this card, then you flip it to the the non-quiet side, the loud side. This side says interrupt when any amount of damage would be dealt to Venom by an attack. You may place that many chime counters here instead. So you can now choose to, instead of damaging Venom, if you find that he's getting too unmanageable, things are getting a little out of control, you can add chime counters instead with your attack, and that's going to allow you to eventually flip this over to the other side. When you flip it over to the other side, which is the loud side, it now says increase all damage Venom takes by 1. So now all the damage, even though you've given up some damage to be able to put the chime counters on there, now all your damage is going to be increased by 1, which is a big deal. It's going to help you defeat him a little bit quicker. And if there are no chime counters here, then you're going to flip this back to the quiet side. So now you want there to be chime counters here. Again, the amount of chime counters will be at its max from when you flipped it over. You're leaving the chime counters on there. The Forcer Interrupt, when Venom's attack would deal any amount of damage to an identity, remove that many chime counters from here. For each chime counter removed this way, prevent one of that damage. So this one is not a may, you have to do it, but you are going to also prevent damage coming to you. So there is this really interesting balance with this environment. It's not required that you even use the environment. I would imagine it's going to be tough to go through a scenario and never engage with the bell tower, but based on what we're seeing, it's your choice. If you find that you have things under control, you've built a deck in such a way that you don't necessarily have to worry about Venom's large attacks, you're preventing that damage in a different way, you can kind of ignore the bell tower, but it's there as this fallback to basically help you out if you find the scenario is getting a little bit too difficult for you, or Venom needs to be managed, you need to prevent some damage, whatever the case may be. I really like that mechanic. I love that they included the bell tower and found a really interesting way to do it rather than it just being a single card that comes up sometimes in the scenario. It's basically always going to be there. I really, really like that. And then we have Guard the Bell Tower. So this is a side scheme that says that treat the bell tower's printed text box as if it were blank except for the trait. When this is revealed, remove each chime counter from the bell tower and flip it to its quiet side. Now Venom is guarding the bell tower. So it's like Venom, the villain, is aware that this is his weakness. He's guarding it, and until you deal with the side scheme, until you deal with him and his guarding of it, you can't use the bell tower. Love it. Thematically, it makes sense. It basically, they realized Venom was going to be powerful. They added the bell tower for us to help manage that. And then they realized that that's going to make things easier for us to deal with Venom, so they added Guard the Bell Tower to help Venom out. It's this chain of just these different situational cards being added in, and I really, really like the thematics of it all. I think it's going to be really interesting to jump between the different things you're managing, all while trying to take care of Venom and defeat him. Love the scenario so far from what I'm seeing. I'm really excited to try it out. And then we get to Mysterio. So Mysterio might be, I think it definitely is, the scenario that, from the ones that have been revealed, that I'm most excited about. Again, I haven't played these. When I actually play them, it could absolutely change which ones I find most interesting. But based on the mechanics, this is the one that caught my interest the most. So Mysterio has 2 scheme, 1 attack, and he has the ability Seeds of Fear, which is a force response after you resolve a boost card during Mysterio's activation. Place that card in your discard pile if it has the illusion trait. Now, this is the mechanic with Mysterio, is that the cards from the encounter deck are being put into your discard pile, your player discard pile, or shuffled into your deck. We've seen this with our cards. The first introduction was our cards being able to be shuffled into the encounter deck, and it gave us a benefit when they came out. This is the reverse now for villains, where we'll see in shortly with some of these other cards we're going to look at how these affect us when they're drawn, but essentially they're going to be bad for us and they're going to be shuffled into our deck, and they're also going to take up one of your card draws, which is horrible. So very, very interesting. I really, really like it. I could eat my words when I realized this is super difficult and it ends up being frustrating, but from a mechanic and thematic perspective, I love this idea. I think it's really, really neat. So then we have the main scheme, which is a Maze of Mirrors. This is the first level of it, and it says, Force Interrupt, when you would draw or discard an encounter card from your deck, deal it to yourself as a face down encounter card, then draw 1 card. So you do get a card draw in lieu of what you've just drawn. It's not like you're adding the encounter card to your hand. However, you are getting dealt that card as a face down encounter card, and if you had a bunch of these shuffled in and a bunch of them were coming out, suddenly you could have a turn where you have 3 encounter cards extra being dealt to you, which is really, really difficult, right? And that's when you would draw or discard an encounter card from the deck. So there's no way to sort of get around this by saying, I'm just going to discard the top card of my deck with this card and not have to deal with it. Either way, it's getting dealt to you as a face down encounter card. You may have some information on what that card's going to be, but that doesn't negate the fact that these could be really difficult cards to deal with, especially all in conjunction with each other. So that's the Maze of Mirrors main scheme and how it ties into Mysterio, and I think that's like the conjunction of the two is what makes this just such an interesting and exciting scenario to look at. So the next card we're going to look at is Humongous Hallucination, which is a super long alliteration-filled title here. And it's an attachment that gives +3 attack to Mysterio specifically, and it says hero action spend 1 resource of any type and shuffle the top 2 cards of the encounter deck into your deck and to discard this card. So again, we're seeing many more ways that encounter cards are going to get shuffled into your deck. This one is giving him +3 attack. You're probably going to want to deal with this. It might not seem like you have to do a lot at the time to get rid of it. 1 single resource force and is not hard to do, and the other one is just shuffling 2 cards in, but you're gonna regret those cards later on when they get dealt to you. So it's a matter of short-term gain with getting rid of this card for potentially long-term consequence. You have to kind of balance that, especially with how many cards are in your deck. Super interesting. I love that they're integrating that into more cards to make this a constant theme with Mysterio. Next we have Shifting Apparition. 1 scheme, 1 attack, 1 health. Super weak all around. With guard, however, but it says when defeated, if this minion was defeated with excess damage, so more than a single damage essentially based on its start and health, the defeating player shuffles the top card of the encounter deck into their deck. So you basically have to find a way to ping this off, which exists with a lot of heroes. But now if you have an attack or a way to do 2 damage, suddenly you have to decide, well, I can still kill this, but do I just leave it out there for now because I don't want to shuffle the card in? But it has guard, so the only way to get at the villain is to defeat it. Really, really cool mechanic. Again, another way to shuffle a single card in. It's going to keep adding things to your deck. It's a pretty neat inclusion. And then we have Fearmonger, which is a treachery card with Surge. When revealed, discard your hand, draw up to your hand size. I don't know if you've seen a card like this in villains, and I always say that with a lot of cards because there's so many cards in the game now that it's hard to keep track. But I don't know if we've seen one of these cards introduced where basically you're resetting your entire hand. So if you had a hand that you were excited about or you were looking forward to the next turn, yes, you're going to still have the exact same amount of cards or drawing up to your hand size. So maybe there's even a way where you've already defended or something and you've used cards and you're actually gaining cards from this. There could be a benefit. But if there are cards that you were hoping to use in your next turn and this comes up, suddenly they're gone to the discard pile and you're getting a whole set of new cards. This could end up being not a huge deal, but it could end up being horrible. It's an interesting mechanic and I like that they included it though. And the boost is choose to either spend 2 mind resources or deal this card to yourself as a face down encounter card. Interesting boost as well. So that is Mysterio. Those are the first 3 scenarios. Let's jump into the big one, the 4th one. This is the Sinister Six. It's a scenario with all 6 of the Sinister Six members at once. Interesting, you do not have to defeat them. You're basically just trying to escape the Sinister Six and the scenario. Because of that, the hit points on the villains do not fluctuate with player count. There's a set number of hit points, which might seem, with 4 players, these will be very easy to defeat. You're right, but they're going to keep coming back. They don't stay defeated. That's not the point of the scenario. You're basically just trying to manage with them and deal with them all at different times, basically coming at you from all different angles thematically, and then try to escape the scenario. So the first one we're going to look at is Dr. Octopus. 2 scheme, 2 attack, forced response after Dr. Octopus attacks and damages you. Place 1 threat on each scheme. Move the active counter to the next villain in activation order. So a couple things to talk about here. The activation order is going to involve which of the villains is basically activating you against you on the villain's turn. So the villain is the Sinister Six, but it doesn't seem like they will all activate against you on their turn. Whoever has the active counter will be the one that is activated against you, and that'll jump around. Also, I think you'll notice all the members of the Sinister Six have this thing where it's after they attack and damage you is when their ability triggers. I don't have it up in front of me right now, but we'll get to them as we go through. I think that's the case for all of them, so that's just a unique thing tied to all of them. And then also, when defeated, remove 4 threat from a side scheme, 7 threat instead. If no other villain is in play, set this villain aside. So you'll notice the villains are constantly getting set aside, and there's things that will bring them back into play. All of them have this when defeated text. I'm not going to read it for every single one, but they all have it. It's all removing 4 threat from a side scheme, 7 threat instead if no other villain is in play. And the way that you're winning the scenario is removing threat from a special side scheme that's permanent that is allowing you to escape. So that's why this is on here. Every time you defeat them, you're basically ramping up how quickly you're going to escape. So that is Dr. Octopus. Let's move on to Electro. So Electro has 2 scheme, 1 attack, forced response after Electro attacks and damages you. Discard the top 7 cards of your deck and then move the active counter. So this one is going to make your deck go a little bit quicker, which is going to add extra encounter cards being dealt to you. Obviously, discarding some of the cards that are important to your strategy as well. That is what Electro is going to do. And I'm just realizing now, I said the active counter. It looks like it's not going, it's because I kind of wondered that as I was talking about it. It's not going to be a random activation order. They all have a set order they activate in. So Dr. Octopus was listed as activation order 1. Electro is listed as activation order 2. Every time you play them, it will go in this specific order every single scenario. So it's not going to be this randomized thing where in this one Electro acts first. It will always be Dr. Octopus. Third in activation order is Hobgoblin. Jeez. 2 scheme, 1 attack, forced response after Hobgoblin attacks and damages you, take 2 indirected damage and then move the active counter. So that one is just a straight 2 damage gain dealt to you. It's basically increase the amount of damage you're taking. Not a whole lot to talk about there otherwise. Activation order 4 is Craven the Hunter. 1 scheme, 2 attack. After Craven attacks and damages you, choose and discard a 1 support or upgrade you control. This is going to be really bad if you are playing a hero or have built a deck around them having a ton of these upgrades or really important upgrades and supports in play. Discarding those every time Craven deals with or attacks you is going to really suck. Obviously, he has 9 hit points. After that, we have Scorpion. Scorpion is number 5 in activation order, 0 scheme, but 3 attack. After Scorpion attacks and damages you, stun a character you control. This one is really nasty because of the higher attack and the fact that it's a stun every time and the fact that he has 10 hit points. There's a reason he's later in activation order. This one is pretty nasty. And then we have Vulture. Vulture is 1 scheme, 2 attack, last in activation order. After Vulture attacks and damages you, choose and discard 1 card from your hand. Obviously bad. At least you get to choose the card. It's not random. You're not going to purposely or accidentally lose your most crucial card, but still a pretty nasty villain. So those are all the Sinister 6, and then we have the main scheme, which is Sinister Synchronization. More alliteration here. Ambush is the ability. It's a special, and it says choose a set-aside villain at random and put that villain into play and place the active counter on it. In expert mode, place 2 threat on light at the end, which is the side scheme you're having to remove threat from in order to escape. So basically, this special is going to have many ways of being triggered throughout this entire deck of cards, and every time it's triggered, you're bringing in set-aside villains from out of play back into play. You've defeated them, but they're coming back, and they're getting the active counter, and they're going to act next. So you have to keep in mind which villains you're defeating, knowing that, like, if you only have 1 defeated, you know that anything that triggers ambush is going to bring them into play and they're going to get the active counter. You might be able to manipulate that, use it to your advantage to say, you know, the villain with activation order 1 is, which is Dr. Octopus, is out of play, and I'm about to approach Scorpion, who's really going to hit me hard. Maybe I'm hoping for ambush to come out of play, or there's a way I can trigger it to give Dr. Octopus that activation counter to basically ignore Scorpion coming next. It's an interesting mechanic. It's going to be interesting to see how that comes into play. The Force Interrupt is when a villain would activate if no villain is in play, resolve this card's ambush ability. So you can't get away with defeating all the Sinister 6 and thinking, hey, I don't have to deal with anyone. Basically, if that happens, you're going to have them be brought back into play automatically. Very interesting. Then we have Light at the End, the one we've been talking about. So this is like Light at the End of the tunnel. It's permanent. It has hinder of 10 threat per player. It starts with 10 threat base as well. So if you're playing with 2 players that has 30 threat on it, players cannot win unless they escape. Forced Interrupt, when the last threat is removed from this scheme, resolve the ambush ability on the main scheme and flip this card. The players can escape on the other side. So we actually have not seen the other side, so I don't know. I can't tell you what's involved in the ultimate escape, but I do know you're going to have to remove minimum of 20 threat if you're playing solo, 30 threat if you're playing with 2 players, and so on, to be able to even flip this to the next side. So no joke there. You're probably going to want to bring a Justice a hero of some kind or some way to deal with a lot of threat. I think it's going to be really hard to tackle the scenario, for instance, without any good way of dealing with threat. It seems like that's completely what it's built around, which is really interesting. One of the other cards we're going to look at here is Heightened Morale. This is an attachment. It says attach to the villain with the highest activation order value. That's in play, obviously. If you cannot resolve the ambush ability on the main scheme, then attach this card to the active villain. X is equal to the number of villains in play, which is how much their attack is going to get boosted for. So if you have all the villains in play, that's going to be +6 to attack, which is hugely problematic. Obviously, if you've been dealing with them pretty well, this could be lower and less on your priority list, but it's just something you're going to have to keep in mind. Then we have Take One for the Team. This is an attachment. Attach the villain with the highest attack. If you cannot resolve the ambush ability on the main scheme, then attach this card to that villain. You cannot attack villains who do not have an attached copy of Take One for the Team. So they're basically protecting all the rest of the villains. You have to attack whoever has that attachment. Even if you'd like to attack someone else, you can't. Pretty interesting, and could put you in a situation where you're really close on eliminating a bunch of villains potentially, and you have multiple attacks that you want to do so. And now you have to focus on this one and deal with them first. Pretty interesting way to sort of put a wrench in your strategy. We have Frequent Flyers, which is a treachery card. In expert mode, this card gains Insight 1 and cannot be canceled. I like that they're including this in expert mode text on some cards to make the specific cards more difficult if you're playing an expert mode rather than just all be about including extra expert cards. I like that. When revealed, put the set aside Hobgoblin and Vulture into play. If Hobgoblin is already in play, take 2 indirect damage. If Vulture is already in play, discard 1 card at random. So essentially, there's another one we're going to look at too that it features 2 villains like this. It automatically brings 2 specific villains, like a team up, into play, but for either of them, if they're already in play, you're basically triggering their abilities that are on their card just with this treachery card. These are really nasty, and it's really going to suck when these come up, regardless of whether they're in play or not. So very, very neat, and we get one that's basically the same kind of thing, but this one's called Robotic Enhancements. This is the exact same card I just read, but basically for Doctor Octopus and Scorpion, so I'm not going to go through it, but it triggers their abilities as well. And those are all the villain cards. So there's a ton of stuff revealed here, and that's only the stuff that was revealed. There's tons we haven't seen. There's a 5th scenario we don't know about. Very exciting stuff. I cannot wait to try these scenarios out for myself. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in them. Let's jump into the hero cards, which is with the Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider is what they call her, and Miles Morales, and look at all the cards that have been revealed. Okay, right before we jump in, I'm just going to preface this. So when this box was first announced, we just got like very little information, but we knew that the 2 heroes that were going to be in there based on the box art. At that point, I was more excited for Miles Morales Spider-Man. After having read these cards and seeing the details, maybe it's an unpopular opinion, I don't know. I am much more excited for Ghost Spider and Gwen Stacy based on the way the mechanics are. And that's just my personal play style. It's not that I'm saying Miles Morales doesn't look good. He looks great. It's just based on the way I like to play Marvel Champions. She's one that I think is going to really resonate with me and how I like to play. So let's jump into Gwen Stacy. Her action ability on her, I should say 3 recovery, 10 hit points, hand size of 6. Her action ability is choose to either shuffle Ticket to the Multiverse from your discard pile into your deck, or ready Gwen Stacy, George Stacy, her dad. So limit of once per round, pretty interesting action card for an alter ego. You basically it's always specifically tied to either one of either card, George Stacy or Ticket to the Multiverse. So I don't think we've seen where it's targeting 2 cards of that specifically, but pretty interesting mechanic. So I think before we even jump into Ghost Spider, we should probably look at those 2 cards so you can better understand what it is you're doing here. So let me just go through my tab here and find them, because I definitely didn't put them in the proper order. Oh boy. George Stacy, there we go. George Stacy is a 1-cost support that says events attached to George Stacy may be played as if they were in your hand. Action, exhaust George Stacy and attach 1 event card from your hand face down here to a maximum of 3. So you might be wondering why this is happening. Basically, Ghost Spider is very much built around comboing. As we get into your abilities, you'll see that basically every time you're using one of her basic attacks or different things like that, you're going to be, or there's other ways it triggers, so you're basically triggering extra abilities and extra cards. The event cards being tied to George Stacy means that you can basically build up the cards that you want for the most opportune time and then have them available instead of having to have drawn those cards at the wrong time and say, oh, like, this is great, but I don't need it right now. This is a really good way to get around the problem that happens in a lot of card games with combo decks. Is you might get your combo pieces at the wrong time, especially if it's games where you want to be cycling through your hand a little bit more, and it's just, it's great, but it's just not great at that moment, and so you have to discard them or use them at an inopportune way and then not get the full effect out of them. George Stacy is going to basically allow you to get more use out of your event cards by saving them for the right moment. So that is the George Stacy card that is tied to the alter ego. And then we have Ticket to the Multiverse. So Ticket to the Multiverse is a 3-cost upgrade that actually has 2 wild resources that it gives. So it has it's better than strength and energy and all those cards, those resource cards, just on its base if you're not using it for its ability, which is really interesting. And then the ability is action, remove Ticket to the Multiverse from the game. So this is a one-time use. I think that's why it has the 2 wild resources. You're using this once, but until then it's at least a resource card for you. Discard your hand, shuffle your discard pile into your deck, and draw up to your hand size and ready each Ghost Spider card you control. You're basically resetting your entire game. Not your entire game, but your player state. So you're shuffling everything back in, you're discarding everything, you're starting from scratch, you're drawing a hand, get right to your hand size, and the fact is you could have already done stuff on this turn and then end with this and essentially reset your turn and get to do it again. And you're readying every single Ghost Spider card that you control as well, so you're getting access to them all again. If you use this after you've completely built up Ghost Spider and like near the end of the game when you really need to have a big turn, you can do a whole lot on one turn, and I'm really excited to see all her cards to know how much we can stretch this. There's a reason it's only a one-time use. I like that they added the wild resources to compensate that, but again, keep in mind that with the Gwen Stacy alter ego side, her action ability is going to let you shuffle Ticket to the Multiverse from your discard pile into your deck, which means that if you've used it for a resource and suddenly you find yourself in a situation where you're like, this is the time to book my ticket to the multiverse, so to speak, you can go grab that just by being an alter ego form and have it more at the ready. So very, very cool integrations. I really like what I'm seeing here. Let's jump into the hero side finally, which is Ghost Spider. Ghost Spider's got the 1, 2, 3 stats, thwart, attack, and defense, and dizzying reflexes is the ability. This is a response after you resolve an interrupt or responsibility on an event. Ready Ghost Spider, limit once per phase. So this is where another reason those event cards are going to be important is basically anytime you resolve an interrupt or response, you're readying Ghost Spider and you can do more with Ghost Spider. The readying on Ghost Spider is better than a ready on just any old hero, because of the cards we're going to get into. Her use of basic abilities is everything in the way that she plays. So having her ready is going to open up a ton of possibilities for you. She has hit points of 10 still, hand size of 5. Let's jump into other cards so you can understand just how important that is, because I feel like that gives you a better grasp of the power potential here. So we have Ghost Kick, 2-cost event, hero response attack. After Ghost Spider uses a basic power, deals 6 damage to an enemy, max 1 basic power use. So if you use thwart, attack, or defense, you can use this as a response and do 6 damage for 2, which added on to her basic attack means that for 2 damage or 2 resources, you're doing 8 damage, which is huge. It's ridiculous. I love the idea that this is tied to base abilities, because then you could also, in a pinch, if you really needed to remove 1 thwart and you feel like you're losing out by doing that, you can compensate that by doing 6 damage for 2. Really powerful card. In similar style, Phantom Flip is a 2-cost event that is hero response thwart. After Ghost Spider uses a basic power, remove 5 threat from his scheme, max 1 per basic power use. So again, this is the thwart removal variation, so you're basically removing 5 threat for 2 instead of doing 6 damage for 2. Also very, very good. It could basically be 6 threat for 2 if you thwarted with Ghost Spider as her basic ability. Super powerful. And then we have Pirouette and Punch. So this is a 2-cost event, hero interrupt. When a card is revealed from the encounter deck, deal damage to the villain equal to 1 more than the number of boost icons on it, and cancel that card's when revealed effects. This completely wipes out that card from having any effect on you and spins it back on the villain by doing damage equal to the boost icon. So very, very good card. Very interesting. It is a bit pricey for like it being a hero interrupt. It's going to, if you have a 6-card hand, it's essentially, eliminating 3 cards from your hand, this card and 2 others, but it's a really strong effect, and it's going to be one that in a pinch you could really get a lot of mileage out of. Next, we have Web Bracelet. This is a 2-cost upgrade, hero response after you resolve an interrupt or responsibility on an event card, which is the same trigger as the hero ability for Ghost Spider. Exhaust Web Bracelet to draw 1 card. This is a fantastic card you're going to hope to get out early, because now basically, if we go back to Ghost Spider, every single time you resolve an interrupt or responsibility, you're going to ready Ghost Spider and you're going to draw a card. You're going to get so much more out of every single one of your turns with Ghost Spider by doing this, because now you're going to have an extra card to pay for all the events that you might be drawing into as well. You're going to do more basic abilities that are going to allow you to do more with these events. It's going to be if you like combo decks in card games, if you like combos or whatever, this is the hero to gravitate towards, because everything is going to feel like you're comboing constantly and just being super overpowered. It's one of the reasons I really like how Quicksilver ramps up with all these cards and all the readying. I feel like Ghost Spider is going to scratch somewhat of a similar itch in a different play style. That is Web Bracelet. Those are all the hero-specific cards. She is a protection hero. Let's jump into some of the protection cards. We do get Silk, which is a new ally, and she does have the Web Warrior trait, which is going to come into play, as we'll see, with like the Web Warriors do get powered up from each other and the existence of more of them. So this is a 2-cost ally with 2 health, 1 thwart, 1 attack. The response is after you play Silk from your hand, if you control another Web Warrior card, search the encounter deck for a treachery and discard it. Very cool. So if there's a treachery card that you specifically hate, and I know exactly which one you guys are thinking of, I'm not even going to say it, you can search for it in the deck and discard it, so you don't even have to deal with it if it's going to be coming up. And the only trigger you need for that is having another Web Warrior in play. So this is really, really good. I will mention it is pretty low stats. It is only a 2-cost ally, so as a chump blocker, the stats really don't matter. You're just using it as a chump blocker, and you gain this potentially really useful ability. It is going to matter which scenario you're against. If you find there isn't a treachery card that's completely ruining your day, I don't know that Silk's going to really do a lot for you, but it is a really cool mechanic and inclusion in the game. Then we have Spider UK. I'm going to be honest with you, I did not know Spider UK existed. I didn't know this was a thing, but I love it. 3-cost ally, 5 health, tons of health. 2 attack, 1 thwart, and 2 consequential damage on the attack. Interrupt, when Spider UK defends against an attack, deal damage to the attacking enemy equal to the number of web warrior cards you control. So not only does he have 5 health that he's going to be able to soak up a lot of hits, every single one of those hits that he's soaking up is going to potentially deal damage back to that villain as well. So the fact that he has 5 health means he's probably gonna be able to take a couple hits rather than it just being a one and done. And even though he has 2 damage on the 2 consequential damage on the attack, you're likely not using him for his attack or even his thwart very often. He's pretty much there as a protector. He's dealing his damage by the presence of web warriors. Very cool, but again, hard to gauge the power level because web warriors is a new thing. When we start to get an idea of what web warriors are in the game, and as more packs are released beyond Sinister Motives, suddenly this might become much better because there's some must-have web warriors that are really, really good. So hard to grade right now, but just interesting that we get more of these web warriors included in the game. And then we have Across the Spider-Verse. So this is a basic event, max 1 per deck. Hero action, exhaust a web warrior card you control. Search your discard pile for a web warrior ally and put it directly into play. Then choose a player. That player may spend 3 resources of any type to repeat this ability. Wild card. I love this. Again, we're seeing all the Web Warrior and Spider-Man character integration that we're going to be getting for the foreseeable future, like well into 2022 with 4 packs coming out after this. And the fact that you can go and get basically tutor a specific ally for the 2 costs that you've played for this. I mean, yes, you have to exhaust a card you control, but you're not getting rid of it. You're just exhausting it to basically be able to grab another one. But the most interesting thing is the fact that another player, not even just yourself, can choose to repeat this effect. Yes, they play 1 more resource to do so, but it just you could decide to team up where you're just playing a bunch of Spider-Man heroes and do this ability and have it just spiral and out of control into bringing a whole bunch of web warriors into play again from across the Spider-Verse. I love it. Thematically, it's cool. I love it as a basic card. We're going to see included a bunch, and it's just a really, really interesting inclusion for the game now that we're getting all these web warriors. Another protection card we're going to look at is Jump Flip. This is a 1-cost event, defense, a hero interrupt defense, I should say. When you would take any amount of damage, prevent 2 of that damage. And if you paid for this card using an energy resource, remove 2 threat from the main scheme as well. So pretty useful little card. It's only going to cost you 1 for an event. You're only preventing 2 damage, but sometimes that is, all you need to prevent in certain situations, and it's pretty cheap to do so. But if you paid for this using an energy resource, now you're on top of that for 1, you're also removing 2 threat from the main scheme. That's a lot of value for 1. I think you're going to be wanting to include this if you think you can reliably hit that second condition. In a pinch, using it to just prevent 2 damage is fine, but if that's all the card said, you're likely not including this in a lot of decks. It's that extra effect that really you get a ton of mileage for 1. Very cool card. And then we have What Doesn't Kill Me, which of course makes you stronger. 2-cost event, requirement. This is a brand new mechanic from what I understand. I have not seen this before. So there's a requirement that you have to use a specific resource to pay for this. Now, it only has a single fist, a single strength resource shown, which means I don't think you have to pay for both using the strength resource. I could be wrong there, but it just says while paying for this, spend the listed resources. It's showing 1, so I imagine that 1 of your 2 has to be a strength resource. Hero action, heal 2 damage from your hero and ready your hero. So it's a really good card, and they kind of balance that with the requirement. I'm interested to see where we're going to see this requirement thing featured in the future in the game, because what's interesting is you can have a really powerful card now that seems way overpowered, but if you give it a requirement, suddenly it's really hard to play it sometimes, and that balances how powerful it is. I like that that's being included now, because I think we're going to see some really powerful cards get introduced into the game that are balanced by the fact that they have this requirement. So that is Ghost Spider. Let's take a look at the other hero, and this is Miles Morales. So the alter ego side has 4 recovery, 9 hit points, hand size of 6, and the response is after you change to this form, shuffle 1 Spider-Man card from your discard pile into your deck. So Miles Morales is Spider-Man. We should mention these cards are not interchangeable with the Spider-Man cards that was introduced in the course, that you can't take Peter Parker Spider-Man cards and put them into this deck for any reason. But basically his response is after you change to this form, every single time, you're going to shuffle one of the cards that you want from the Spider-Man hero cards back into your deck. So if there's those cards that are really crucial to what you're trying to do or really important, or you have a low deck, you want to draw them immediately, this is going to be a way to get them back and use them more often. Not a lot more to talk about there, so let's jump into the Spider-Man side, which is really good stat line, 2/2/2 across the board. I think that was Captain America's stat line as well, if I'm not mistaken. The ability, he is a web warrior, Venom Blast, special, deal 2 damage to an enemy, stun that enemy. So, and I'll actually say the other one first. There's also Spider Camouflage, which is also a special, give Spider-Man a tough status card, confuse an enemy. So both of the abilities on this card are not triggerable. Is that a word, triggerable? You cannot trigger them without having something to basically queue up that special. So basically we're starting to see what the mechanics surrounding Miles Morales as Spider-Man are. So we'll get into some of his cards and start to see how these specials are going to be triggered. But basically all you have to know is that Venom Blast does 2 damage to an enemy of your choice and stuns them, whereas the Spider Camouflage gives Spider-Man a tough status card and confuses an enemy. So let's jump into Swing In. You know what? I'm going to take a pause here and just say something. I wanted to mention this at the beginning and I forgot. The artwork across all these cards is some of the my favorite I've seen from a single box or single release. I love the artwork on all these cards. Just beautiful. I hope you've been admiring them as I put them up on the screen. So this one is Swing In, 2-cost event, hero action, thwart, remove 4 threat from a scheme, and if you paid for this card using a mind resource, resolve Spider-Man's camouflage ability. So again, the camouflage ability, I'm not going to keep going back every single time, but just to remind you, this time you'll give Spider-Man a tough status card and confuse an enemy. So we'll see that a lot of his ability cards don't have huge numbers for the cost compared to some other heroes we've seen in the game, but do trigger his special ability, which gives them a lot more mileage and a lot more that they do. So you're going to want to try to trigger those every time if possible, but if not, as much as possible. Then we have Web Shot, which is a 2-cost event, hero action attack, deal 4 damage to an enemy, and if you paid for this card with a mind resource, activate the Venom Blast ability. So again, if you're able to activate the Venom Blast ability, it's 2 costs to do 6 damage and to stun an enemy, which is ridiculous. That if that was just a base card, it would be so ridiculously powerful that again, we see why you want to try to trigger these special cards whenever possible, because they're just so strong. We have Arachnobatics, which is a little play on words there. 1-cost event, hero action attack, deal 2 damage to an enemy. If that enemy has a stun status card on them, deal 3 additional damage to it. If that enemy has a confused status card, deal another 3 additional damage. You have ways to stun and confuse enemies with the special abilities, and this only costs 1, so it's not out of the realm of possibility to think that you can trigger this all in a single turn. But if you do, the fact that you're doing 8 damage for 1, which is easily the most powerful card in the game. If that was what it did base in terms of damage, being dealt when I say powerful. But if you can hit that reliably, if you have a way to build a deck around other ways to make sure that the villain is always stunned, always confused, or you're able to do that very often, the potential on this card is wild. Really, really ridiculous card. Then we have Power Within. This is a 1-cost upgrade card. Hero response, after your hero uses a basic power, discard Power Within to resolve Spider-Man's Venom Blast ability. So this basically gives you another way to trigger Venom Blast basically at any point you want. This is an upgrade that's going to stay in play until you use a basic power, and when you use that basic power, you will trigger it. So again, it's in plan to use a basic power, but you can kind of now plan around this Venom Blast being triggered to add a stun card to a villain, for instance, to potentially now be able to queue up Arachnobatics. So there is some comboing you can do there and some timely maneuvering of your cards. We then have Defense Mechanism, which is another 1-cost upgrade. Hero response, after your hero uses a basic power, discard Defense Mechanism to resolve the Camouflage ability, Spider Camouflage. So this is the same as the last card, but it's basically now triggering the other abilities. So if you have them both in play, you can basically time when you add a Confuse and a Stun counter and then throw out Arachnobatics and do 8 damage right there. So very, very good card, obviously, in that combo, and it's going to be something that you're wanting to consider when you're going to trigger it. We then have Double Life. This is a really interesting card. It's a 1-cost event, max 1 per round. Action, change your form. if you paid for this card using a fist resource, ready your identity. So it's just a card that changes your form. So if you changed back to Miles Morales this turn to add a Spider-Man card into your deck to heal back up, now you can basically flip back and ready your hero and essentially go at it again. I love that this card is in there. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how, for such a cheap cost, how powerful the potential of this card is. But being able to get extra flips and do more and potentially heal up when otherwise you might not have been able to, really, really good. Okay, so those are all these Spider-Man hero cards. Now let's jump into some of the leadership cards, or not leadership, justice cards, because this is a justice deck. So the first one is an ally, Monica Chang. This is 3-cost ally, 1 thwart, 1 attack. After Monica Chang enters play, search your deck, hand, and discard pile for a copy of Surveillance Team, the support card, and put it into play, and place 1 Snoop counter on each Surveillance Team you control. So Surveillance Team is an older card. It's not a brand new card. So I brought it up here. Where did I put it? Did I bring it up here? Yeah, there it is. Surveillance Team is a card that already existed. It's a 2-cost support. It has 3 Snoop counters right from the get-go, and every time you exhaust it and remove one of those counters, you remove a threat from a scheme. So it's a tried and true card that we've seen before. Monica Chang is now an ally that specifically tutors that out, brings it into play, and gives you an extra counter on it. So now you'll have 4 counters on it. Very, very good card. And the fact that it's actually 1 Snoop counter on each Surveillance Team you control is that if there's multiple ones in play, you're getting a counter added to all of them. So it's really, really neat to see them introduce a new card that specifically targets one specific old card and makes it feel like there's a new way to integrate it into decks. I would love to see them do more of this, and I wonder if we'll eventually see this be a theme where we get 1 ally introduced for each of the aspects that specifically targets a reliable card that already exists in the game. I think that would be really neat. I've said this before, I love when they find new ways to make old content relevant again, or included in different ways in new deck building. I think it's great for people who, invest in all these cards or potentially don't buy all the packs but want new ways to look at their old cards again. Monica Chang is a really, really cool card. It's hard to comment on her power level at this point, but it is just super interesting. I cannot wait to build a deck with that in mind. And then we have a brand new basic ally, which is Agent 13. 4-cost ally, 2 thwart, 1 attack, 4 health, response after Agent 13 attacks or thwarts, choose a shield support and ready that support. So any support that has the shield trait on it, you're going to be able to ready every single time Agent 13 attacks, which she can do a multitude of attacks because of her high health. She is a really pricey ally at 4. It's really hard sometimes to justify some allies when they're at that cost, but again, her ability is really powerful to compensate, and you're obviously at that point building a shield deck, and at that point Agent 13 is probably an automatic include, so it'll be interesting to try her out. It's hard to really grade her again with some of these cards without playing them, but I'm intrigued by the shield archetype and seeing how we can dive into that a little bit more. And then we have Field Agent, some more shield cards. So this is a 1-cost support, has 3 uses, which is 3 counters on it. Hero Interrupt, when a shield ally would take any amount of consequential damage, exhaust Field Agent and remove 1 backup counter from it to prevent 1 of that damage. So most allies have 1 consequential damage. So if you look at it as that on the average, basically 3 times you can have one of your cards take no consequential damage, which is going to have their longevity increase, allow them to do more while they're in there. Yes, it's only specifically for shield allies, but it's still really, really cool. I like that they're adding this other archetype with shield and giving us a lot of tools for it. Again, hard to comment on these new archetypes, and when it's something that we can't go and play test and really check out now to know how good the shield archetype is going to be. But I like that they're targeting those specific cards, and it is interesting that you basically get to negate consequential damage. And then we have Homeland Intervention. This is a 0-cost event. Exhaust up to three shield cards you control and choose a scheme. Remove 2 threat from that scheme for each card exhausted this way. So this is basically 0 cost. Remove up to 6 threat at once. So obviously that's ridiculously powerful, but the condition is pretty specific. If you're in a shield deck and you can hit this requirement, that is ridiculously powerful for 0 cost. So I think that, again, in a shield deck, this is going to be really, really powerful, but it's not an auto-include in Justice decks because you have to have that shield archetype. And then lastly, we have Global Logistics, yet another shield card. 0-cost event, exhaust 1 shield card you control. Look at the top 4 cards of a player deck or the encounter deck and discard any number of those and put the others on the top or bottom of the deck in any order. This is tons of customization. You can look at the top 4 cards of the encounter deck, get rid of all the ones that you don't like, put the rest of the back on top in any order so you know when they're coming up. You can do the same thing with your player deck to get rid of cards that aren't going to help you now, or put them on the bottom, or on the top I should say, to be able to draw them right away. Really, really cool card to be able to logistically, global logistics, plan out your next few turns on one of the decks and you know, set yourself up for success. So really, really cool card. Whew, okay, that is it. There's a lot of cards to go through. Again, with all these cards, it's really hard to accurately comment on how good or bad they're going to be until we play them. All I can really comment on is what I think things are going to pan out as, or what my excitement level is. I am super, super hyped for this expansion. I know I say that with all of them, but I'm such a huge Spider-Man fan. These heroes look so interesting, especially Ghost Spider for me and the comboing. The villains are all ones I'm super familiar with, growing up with these characters as a kid. I can't always take on the Sinister Six. I'm really intrigued on what the 5th scenario is, Fantasy Flight. If you want to drop me, you know, some hints or give me some card reveals on this 5th scenario, I'd be happy to introduce it on my channel and get a sneak peek, just saying. But I'm really pumped for this. I know you all are too. Let me know, out of all the stuff I've revealed here today from this article, which villain are you most excited about? Which hero of the two are you most excited about? What's your thoughts? What's the 5th scenario going to be? I would love to hear all your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, there will be one more Marvel Champions video, I believe, only this year, and that is going to be my best of Marvel Champions 2021. I should have said it at the beginning, but if you haven't yet, vote in the comments. It's about to close. I think when this goes up, it's closing tomorrow. So you have basically less than 24 hours to vote if you have not yet. Otherwise, that video will go out in the next 2 weeks. You'll see all the results on what I picked for all my best of Marvel Champions 2021 and what fans have chosen. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.